Hey everyone, it's Stephanie and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm here with another installment in my Dickens project. I broke my own rules because I originally started this wanting to read all of Dickens' works in publication order, but I tried starting Barnaby Rudge about 3 times and just was not in the mood for it and was just not successful. And so when Kate from Kate Howe and a few other people said they were going to read Dombey and Son, I asked if I could join because I know Katie from Books and Things absolutely loves it. So does Kate. It's one that I've been wanting to read because of all the hype that I've heard for it. So I skipped Barnaby Rudge and Martin Chuzzlewit, which I will go back and read, but yeah, we're just embracing the chaos and we're gonna go with Dombey and Son for now. So I actually have 2 editions. So this is the one I read out of, super cheap Wordsworth edition. I could break the spine and, write all in it. But I also have my great grandmother's Royal Canadian edition. So the works of Charles Dickens. And this was a limited number, so I think there were only 1,000 of these made, and my grandmother gave these to me. They're just so good, but they have the illustrations in it. I'm trying to do this gently, like the title page, limited to 1,000 sets, and then it just has the typical illustrations that we all love. Dombey and Son. What is this about? So in this book, we really don't follow Mr. Dombey and his son through most of this, but it opens up where Mr. Dombey and his daughter Florence, Mr. Dombey's son is being born and his wife passes away. And Mr. Dombey is all about his business, all about his son. He wants his business to be passed on to his son Paul, and so his focus is so much on that he completely neglects his daughter, and isn't like horrible, like abusive or anything like that, but he's very neglectful. He makes it very clear that Paul is important and Paul is number one in the family, and everything is all about Paul. And just like with a Dickens novel, the plot kind of takes shape and expands from there. But really, we follow Florence, his daughter, from about the time she's 6 when Paul was born to adulthood, and as well as, other characters and plot lines. It's hard to talk about the plot without spoiling anything. So I will just say that the plot was very good. Very, very good. And I really enjoyed what Dickens did with this novel. The introduction to the audiobook that I listened to in tandem with reading it said that this is one of the novels that Dickens actually planned out before he started writing it. And I think you can really tell. It feels like a turning point in Dickens' writing, which, to be fair, I haven't read the previous 2 books yet at all. And this was not a reread either. This was my first time reading it. And even though it's 800 pages, you can tell that there's a lot more like structure to the plot. It's not as meandering as his earlier novels have been. And I felt like it didn't feel like filler because this was his 7th novel, and it was published serially between 1846 and 1848. So for something that was published that way over about 2 years, it actually feels pretty like tight and well plotted and planned, unlike some of his other books. So we do have some really good characters. There's Florence, who can be boring at times, but I do really like her. I think she is a very important character and is a really good exploration of a lot of the themes that I'm going to talk about in a minute. We also have Edith, Mr. Dombey's second wife, Captain Cuddle, who is just a joyful character, Solomon Gills and Walter, who are great characters, Mr. Toots, who is just a delight, and we also have Mr. Carker, who is kind of a villain, but then sometimes he's nice, but sometimes he feels underhanded. But Dickens always talks about his incredibly white teeth, and it's just very weird. So I just envisioned him having these like fangs that are just like pinging white, like they did in like the Orbit or commercials. I also think that because this book was very well plotted, the themes are consistent throughout this. There's really good characterization. In Dickens' earlier books, he does lean a lot on caricatures to exaggerate these characters to make a point about, society or Victorian times or, whatever he's wanting to look at. Had only like one or two psychologically complex characters. And one of the reasons that this feels like a turning point for him is because we have less caricatured characters and much more psychologically complex characters, which was actually really refreshing and just really interesting. And it just made this book one that, even though I finished it about a month ago, I still think about. And when I think about it, I think of new things that I didn't think about while I was reading it. I also think his female characters are better written in this book than other books, which I find really fascinating because it feels modern for the time that it was written. It actually explores a lot of like proto-feminist themes and the role of females in society. So you can tell he put more work into his female characters and more thought into them. Not that he didn't before, but it just felt so much more intentional. So just to start off, I think it's really interesting, like the title is Dombey and Son. So it's already telling you that even though we're following Florence throughout the majority of this book, it's like she's kind of left out of the title. She's left out of the business. She's kind of left out of the family, which I think speaks a lot to society at that time. Women couldn't inherit businesses, couldn't run the business, so they were like no good compared to men. I just think it's really interesting. So it really just places those familial and gender roles like at the forefront immediately once you find out who we're actually following in this book. I also enjoyed the nautical elements of this one. You can tell from the cover there's going to be a bit of a nautical theme. There wasn't as much as I wanted. I really thought, like going in knowing really nothing about this, that it was maybe going to be set on a ship or, something like that. It really wasn't. But we do have a character that is on a ship and is away for a while. They use a lot of ships and stuff for their business. So there is that. And anything nautical is like a buzzword for me. One thing that I did enjoy in the beginning of the book, we do follow Paul with Florence for a little bit. And so I enjoyed seeing him grow up and seeing the world through his eyes. He's just looks at everything in such an idyllic way, and he's questioning his father, like, what is money? Like, what does it actually do? And he just really loves his sister Florence so much, and they have such a good relationship. And when he goes off to school, he actually really misses Florence, I think more than his dad. Which I think is interesting since his dad puts him on such a high pedestal from so early on. Some of my favorite scenes with Paul, while he was at school and Florence would come visit him, they would go to the beach, and he was a sickly child, and so he and Florence had to help him there, so he couldn't really walk as well. but they would just look at the ocean and the beach and enjoy walking along the beach and getting the sea air, which I just absolutely adored. I think this book is one that I really appreciated too because of all the themes that it explores. So I'll try to do this without being spoilery, because like I said, it's really hard to talk about the plot without spoiling something, because the characters in the plot are just so wonderfully intertwined. Like I said before, with the title, money and business are a really big theme in this book. Paul questioning his dad about money and what money is about. And you can really tell with Mr. Dombey, he's like, money can get you anything, almost. Almost is super important. And I think that's really part of the focus on the novel, is the things that money can't buy are the things that we really need to value, especially because at the time capitalism was on the rise. And so we're kind of seeing the values shift in Victorian society and shifting away from the past in, you know, nostalgia and sentimentality into more of a capitalistic, cold society was really fascinating. I also enjoyed the exploration of family and just the various relationships in the book. And I think it's interesting, the biological family in this book was broken. You know, Mr. Dombey is not a great father to Florence. He was very doting to Paul, but he's also instilling in him these values that money is everything. Your business is everything. You are number one. You are the best. You are going to take over this business. So he's really not instilling a good balance of values with Paul. But despite that, Paul is just such a wholesome, wonderful kid. Learns some of the good values from his sister Florence, who's more softer and definitely kind of a foil of Mr. Dombey. I also absolutely loved the focus on found family in this book. I love anything found family, and it really, really is at the forefront of this one, since Florence is just so neglected and just dismissed by her father. She develops relationships with other characters that just really welcome her in and love her for who she is. They don't expect anything of her. They just want to be her friend and her family, just because. And I absolutely love that. You know, Captain Cuddle is just an absolute joy. And I absolutely loved it every time he came on page, because he's just such a good character. He and Solomon Gills are such good father figures to Florence, which just really speaks to the found family aspect of it all. Walter is great found family. I absolutely love him. He's a cinnamon roll. And then Mr. Toots is just a darling, and I love him. And, you know, every time he came on page, I just wanted to give him a hug, because he was just so like, just like everything is just so overwhelming, but he's just such a good person, and just everything. And then Edith, who is Mr. Dombey's second wife, she and Florence developed a really lovely relationship. And I absolutely love, despite some plot things that happen, Edith and Florence's relationship was really strong despite all that. And they just had an instant love for each other, like a safe space with each other and an openness, which was really, really lovely to see. Edith was a really fascinating character, which kind of leads into my next theme that I enjoyed exploring, which was gender and gender roles. It really challenges Victorian gender roles and ideals, especially with Edith. It explores how Victorian marriages, more usually for love, they were more like a business transaction, and women were viewed as like commodities, and really challenges that. And it really looks at what we now would call toxic masculinity. And Mr. Dombey is just very, you know, to be the ideal Victorian man, you can't be weak, you can't show emotion, You have to be successful. You have to have money. And really the best characters in this book, the best male characters, are the ones that show emotion and show love, just embrace the people in their lives. So it was really very interesting. Edith was a lovely pushback to the gender norms, and she was just really fascinating, and she would just say whatever she wanted. It almost felt like no filter for that time. It was just very interesting. So I absolutely loved this book. And like I said, the more I'm away from it, the more I get from it. So I highly recommend it. It did take me a little bit to get into this book. I feel like even though it is readable just like a Dickens, for some reason it just took me, you know, like a couple pages to really get into like the rhythm of reading it. It felt a little bit denser than the Charles Dickens that I've read up to this point, but that also could be because I kept taking major breaks while I was reading this because I had so much like other stuff to do, and I kept putting this on the back burner, which I'm really sad I did because this was just such a lovely time. I just think this is a really underrated Dickens novel. So have you read this one? If so, how do you rank it in relation to the other Dickens you've read? If you'd like to leave an emoji, leave some kind of like water wave emoji down below. As always, if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button if you'd like, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.